We often see people gliding through life seemingly untroubled, maybe not the deep thinking types.
Right.
And then there's us, those of us who feel the weight of thinking a bit more deeply. Why is that?
Yeah.
That's something we'll be exploring in this deep dive.
Okay.
We're going to be looking at Arthur Schopenhauer and his, well, let's be honest, somewhat unsettling idea that intelligence might actually be a burden instead of a gift.
Interesting. And, it's really fascinating how much our society values intelligence, right? We link it with success, with a better life, all those good things. But Schopenhauer, he was a real pessimist, a big name in philosophy, and he flipped that idea on its head completely. He said, more understanding actually leads to more suffering. It makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like, what if we've got it all wrong about intelligence?
Exactly. Schopenhauer's point was that being really intelligent can isolate you, make you dissatisfied, even lead to a kind of existential despair. He actually thought that not thinking too deeply, not overanalyzing everything, could be like a shield, protecting you from some of the harsher realities of life.
A blissful shield. I like that.
Right. And I bet a lot of us listening have felt that, haven't we?
Probably.
That feeling of seeing things differently, questioning things that other people just accept as the way to happiness.
Absolutely. And it makes you think, has being more aware of a situation ever made it harder for you to deal with?
All the time. And that's exactly what we're diving into today with Schopenhauer. We're going to try to understand his rather bleak perspective on intelligence. Why did he believe it could be a curse?
Oh, okay.
And is there any way for us to reconcile deep thought with, actually feeling okay? By the end of this, you might just see intelligence, happiness, and the whole human experience in a totally different light. So let's get started.
Sounds good.
Schopenhauer had this belief that life is controlled by what he called, and I love this phrase, a blind, relentless force of will.
Right.
What did that even mean?
Well, it's kind of like this. Schopenhauer saw this will as this primal urge that's inside every living thing, this deep down drive to survive and reproduce.
Okay.
And it just keeps pushing us relentlessly in this never-ending cycle of wanting and then getting, wanting and getting,
Yeah.
But here's the thing. He said intelligence doesn't free us from that. Instead, it makes us super aware of how pointless the whole thing is.
Oh, that's grim.
It is. He's basically saying the more intelligent you are, the clearer you see that this whole desire-driven cycle just goes on and on and on forever. Like a hamster wheel with no cheese at the end, and intelligence lets you see there's no cheese.
So we're all puppets, controlled by this will, and intelligence is the thing that makes us realize we are puppets, but doesn't give us any way to cut the strings.
Pretty much. And that realization, that's where the real suffering starts. Intelligent person. Yeah, it's not pretty. And what's even more fascinating is how this leads to us seeing through a lot of the things we're told will make us happy.
Oh, you mean like society's big illusions?
Yeah, exactly. The whole idea that if you just get the right job, find the perfect partner, or make a ton of money, then you'll be truly content.
The dream, right.
Right. But Schopenhauer argued that intelligent people see through that. They understand that those achievements are fleeting. You get what you want, and then what?
Yeah.
Your desire just latches onto the next thing. It's a treadmill. And seeing through this facade, seeing the emptiness behind it all, that's where a huge amount of disillusionment comes from. And it's something that people who don't overthink things might never experience.
It's like seeing how a magic trick is done. Once you know, the magic is gone.
Yeah, exactly.
And for Schopenhauer, that loss of magic, that's a big source of pain.
Right.
And he also said, didn't he, that intelligence actually makes us more sensitive to pain in general.
Absolutely. This is a crucial point.
No one.
He said intelligence amplifies suffering by making us more sensitive to everything. It's not just about experiencing something bad. It's about how our mind then processes it, dwells on it.
So give me an example. How does that work in real life?
Okay, imagine someone loses their job. Someone who's not, super deep thinking.
Right.
They might feel sad, worried, sure.
Yeah.
But they're also more likely to find ways to distract themselves, focus on the practical stuff, and eventually move.
Okay.
Now, compare that to someone who thinks more. They don't just experience the job loss, they analyze it to death.
Oh, yeah.
Replaying every conversation, questioning their self-worth, thinking about the bigger picture.
Type.
And all that ruminating just makes the pain way more intense and long-lasting. It's like their mind has this built-in amplifier for suffering.
Yeah, it's like a superpower, but for all the wrong thing.
Exactly.
And that must be incredibly isolating, right?
It is. That increased sensitivity to pain, combined with a tendency to see through the shallowness of a lot of social interactions, it often leads to loneliness for really intelligent people.
Makes sense.
They crave these deeper connections, but they're hard to find when most people are happy with, surface level stuff.
It's like you're the only one who sees the problem, while everyone else is dancing around it.
Precisely. And so conversations about trivial things, gossip, trends, it all just becomes frustrating and empty. It's like you're on the edge of society watching, but never truly connecting in a way that satisfies you.
It's lonely out there on the edge. And then on top of all that, Schopenhauer brings up boredom as another uniquely human problem that really hits intelligent people hard.
Right, and this is where he makes this interesting comparison between humans and animals. He said animals mostly operate on instinct, and they're generally content once their basic needs are met.
Yeah.
But humans, we have this self-awareness that creates restlessness in us. People who don't think too deeply can often find plenty of enjoyment in simple pleasures, routine, the everyday stuff.
Keep it simple.
But the intelligent mind, it needs constant stimulation, purpose, meaning.
Yeah. Our brains are wired for more.
Exactly. And so they struggle with the monotony of existence. They get bored with repetitive tasks, shallow conversations, pursuits that seem ultimately meaningless. Ugh, I felt that.
And so they turn to intellectual stimulation, art, philosophy, to try to combat that boredom.
Distract the mind.
Exactly. But even those things can only provide temporary relief.
Right, because the boredom always comes back.
It does. So for the intelligent person, we have this potent cocktail, right?
Okay.
Increased awareness of life's futility, heightened sensitivity to pain, a potential for deep loneliness, and this nagging boredom. It's a tough combination.
Yeah, not a party I want to go to. But then Schopenhauer throws this curveball, stupidity as protection.
Right, and he's not talking about being literally stupid. It's more about a deliberate choice to not dwell on the big, scary existential questions.
Okay, so not unintelligent, just choosing to not engage with the deep stuff.
Exactly. And he's saying that people who do this can live without the burden of realizing how absurd existence can seem. They can just accept social norms, enjoy simple pleasures, and find genuine happiness in things that a more intelligent mind might dismiss as trivial.
Ignorance is bliss. Kind of, yeah. It's like their lack of deep thinking acts as a buffer, protecting them from the angst that can plague the intelligent.
But is that real happiness or just an illusion that's stopping them from facing reality?
That's the million-dollar question. It's like a trade-off. The less you know, the less you question, the easier it might be to feel content. But the cost is a lack of true understanding.
A tricky one. So if intelligence is this potential curse, did Schopenhauer offer any solution?
He did, and luckily it wasn't about trying to become less intelligent. One of his key ideas was detachment.
Detachment. Okay, how does that help?
Well, he believed a lot of our suffering comes from our attachments, our desires, expectations, the constant chase for external fulfillment. The intelligent mind sees through a lot of those illusions, but it can still get caught up in them.
So detachment is about letting go of those, not putting so much importance on them.
Exactly. He said we need to lessen our dependence on the outside world for happiness. Instead of always searching for validation, success, the perfect relationship, we should cultivate a sense of detachment, an acceptance that most desires are temporary and won't truly satisfy us.
It's about shifting the focus inward.
Exact. He drew a lot from Eastern philosophies, especially Buddhism, where the idea that desire is the root of suffering is central.
Makes sense. But how do you actually do that? Detach.
This is where his ideas about aesthetic contemplation come, specifically through art, music, and philosophy.
The finer.
He saw these as ways for intelligent people to step outside the constant grind of the will, to experience beauty and a kind of transcendence that goes beyond everyday life.
So immersing yourself in art or philosophy gives you a break from the suffering.
Yeah, temporarily. When you're totally absorbed in a piece of music, a painting, or a deep philosophical concept, you're freed from your own desires and worry. In those moments, intelligence isn't a burden, it's a tool for experiencing life on a deeper, more meaningful level.
Sounds nice. But you said temporary, so it's not a permanent escape.
Right, unfortunately not. It's more like moments of relief.
Okay, so what else did he suggest?
He also stressed the importance of accepting reality as it is, including the fact that suffering is inevitable.
You can't run from it.
Nope. Instead of fighting against difficulties or complaining about how hard it is to be intelligent, he said we should embrace the world with understanding.
Not giving up, but just acknowledging how things are.
Exactly. It's about understanding that suffering isn't a personal attack. It's just a fundamental part of existence, something we all experience. Seeing clearly in this context isn't a curse that isolates you. It's a way to navigate life with a deeper wisdom, recognizing that everyone struggles.
Reframing suffering, seeing it as part of the human condition, that's a tough one, but I can see how it would change your outlook. So far, we've talked a lot about intelligence as a potential curse, But did Schopenhauer see any way for it to be more than that? Like, could it actually be a good thing?
He did hint at that possibility. He suggested that intelligence might not just lead to suffering, but also to something beyond it, a kind of liberation.
Liberation. That's more like it. How's that work?
It goes back to that awareness of life's absurdity that we talked about. For many, that awareness leads to despair. But Schopenhauer said that for the truly intelligent, it can be a starting point for something better. Once you truly understand that a lot of our desires and pursuits are ultimately pointless, you can step outside of that whole cycle.
So seeing the limits allows you to move beyond them.
Exactly. Liberation in this sense comes from a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing intelligence as a burden that reveals the meaninglessness of everything, you see it as a tool that helps you detach from the things that cause unnecessary suffering.
Interesting.
By recognizing that many of our struggles are fueled by desires that will never truly be satisfied, we can choose to disengage from them.
Okay.
We can pursue understanding instead of chasing those illusions.
And this connects back to his emphasis on intellectual and artistic pursuits, right?
Absolutely. He believed that when the mind is freed from the constant pursuit of distractions, it can achieve moments of profound clarity, moments where suffering seems to dissolve into a deeper awareness. In those moments, intelligence isn't a curse. It's the key to experiencing something truly special.
So it's about using intelligence not to get caught up in worry, but to understand the nature of reality, our place in it. But does that mean becoming a hermit, completely isolated?
Not necessarily. It's more about cultivating a certain mindset, learning to live with different priorities.
Okay.
It means embracing intelligence not as a way to get ahead, but as a way to understand things more deeply. It's about seeing through illusions without bitterness, with acceptance.
So it's a shift from seeking happiness in external things to finding wisdom within.
Precisely. Schopenhauer believed that maybe intelligence isn't meant to bring us conventional happiness, that fleeting feeling. Maybe its purpose is to lead us to something deeper and more lasting.
Wisdom. And what's the difference between wisdom and happiness?
Wisdom, unlike happiness, isn't dependent on external circumstance. It doesn't go up and down with the roller coaster of life. It's a steady presence of clarity and understanding. It's about seeing things as they are, accepting the nature of existence, and finding a sense of balance that doesn't rely on getting what you want.
So it's a more stable internal peace. That brings us back to our original question, doesn't it? Is intelligence a curse or a path to something greater?
I think Schopenhauer would say it depends on how we use it. If we stay trapped in the same desires as everyone else, then intelligence will probably feel like a burden. But if we learn to detach, to see through illusions, and to prioritize wisdom over pleasure, then intelligence changes, becomes the very thing that can free us from suffering.
So the struggle between intelligence and happiness isn't a problem to be solved, it's a paradox to be understood. People who see life more clearly might experience more suffering, but they also have the potential for a deeper awareness. A unique kind of freedom that goes beyond both happiness and despair.
That's a great way to put it. What's really fascinating is how Schopenhauer redefines intelligence. He's saying it's not just about knowledge, it's about the wisdom you gain from that knowledge and how that wisdom can completely change how you experience reality.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Schopenhauer's thought-provoking, and let's face it, sometimes pretty bleak ideas, we'll leave you with this. Is the burden of intelligence a punishment, or could it be a unique responsibility? A responsibility that, if you approach it with detachment and a thirst for wisdom, might lead not to despair, but to a profound, unconventional kind of freedom.
It's something to think about as you navigate your own relationship with knowledge.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.